la mañana tenemos a nuestra segunda invitada internacional en esta sesión. Es la profesora Ulrika Gunnarsson. Ulrika viene del Instituto KTH de Suecia. En mi opinión, posiblemente una de las escuelas de pensamiento ambiental y para la sostenibilidad más importantes a nivel mundial. Ella también es la jefe de la división de sostenibilidad de ese instituto y es una experta en transiciones de sostenibilidad. Y además está muy involucrada en el diseño de los programas de posgrado de medio ambiente y sostenibilidad en ese instituto. Y hoy seguramente vamos a compartir, ella nos va a compartir parte de esa experiencia. Okay, moving to the English. It's a great honor to welcome and present Professor Ulrika Gunnarsson. She is Associate Professor at KTH Royal Institute of Technology, Sweden. There, she is the head of the Sustainability Division. She is one expert in the intersection between planning, decision-making, and sustainability transitions. Today, maybe Ulrika will be sharing with us a little of her experience in the design of academic programs in environment and sustainability, which are quite adaptable for students coming from different disciplines and careers. Then, Ulrika, your audience, and welcome to this event.
Thank you. So I will see if I can share my presentation with you. Okay, do you see my presentation?
Yes.
Thank you. I haven't been using this, this form of digital meeting before. But hello, everyone, and thanks a lot for the invitation to this meeting. I'm really delighted to be here, and I'm very much looking forward to opportunities for continued collaboration and exchange of experience. And I will give a presentation with the title Teaching About Different Understandings of Sustainable Development. And as Alexander said, I work at the KTH, the Royal Institute of Technology in Stockholm in Sweden. And here you see one of the main buildings at our campus, and also how it's situated on the border between the city and the Royal National City Park. I will soon come to my teaching, but just to give you some context about KTH. So KTH is the largest and also oldest technical university in Sweden, and it was founded in 1827. And right now we have around 17,500 students, of which 1/3 are women, and 2,100 are international students. And we are around 4,000 people working here, if you count us as full-time equivalents. And out of this, around 2,800 are within research, and this includes 313 professors, full professors, and 1,600 PhD students. And we have more than 100,000 alumnus all over the world, which is nice. And KTH is actively working for a more sustainable, equal society. And one of the ways that we do this is to make sure that our research and also education and collaborations benefit society. And as we see it as a technical university, KTH has a special responsibility for developing important knowledge needed to promote such sustainable development. We see that education and research can and should contribute to better living conditions and to an ecologically, socially, and economically sustainable societal development. And that is why KTH operations are based on these 4 pillars that you see on the screen. So sustainability, equality, internationalization, and digitalization. So this is also what our president wants to promote. So sustainability is, of course, to support the shifts towards a sustainable society. And this means actually that sustainability is integrated into the core of all KTH activities. So it has already been incorporated into all of KTH's educational programs. And when it comes to equality, the idea is then to work against all forms of discrimination. And from the next year, KTH will offering an equal or will promote an equal environment even more by having a research-based gender equality and diversity education module within all coursework not all coursework, but within all programs at KTH. And then, internationalization. The idea is, of course, to recruit as good teachers and students as possible from all over the world. And when it comes to digitalization, it's about using the opportunities that digitalization gives us, and also be a part of developing this. KTH also works actively with the global goals that the world has agreed upon, and also work with trying to integrate those into teaching. And at least one of the goals should be integrated into all of KTH's educational programs. And KTH is organized under 5 different schools. That's the one that you see on top of the image here. And I work at the School of Architecture and the Built Environment. And there we have 6 different departments. And I belong to the Department of Sustainable Development, Environmental Science and Engineering. So that says something about the organization of KTH. It's quite big, but at my department then we are very focused on sustainability issues. And here you see the building that I work in winter time, because it's snowing on this picture. As Alexander said before, I'm head of the division Sustainability Assessment and Management, and it's a very transdisciplinary environment. And this was a very quick presentation of KTH, but at least you know something about my context now. And I also want to say just something short about my research before I turn into teaching, which also gives you some context of what I'm doing. My research focused the intersection between planning, decision-making, and sustainability transitions. And this means that I'm involved in transdisciplinary projects aiming to spur sustainability transitions. And in order to give a bit more concrete example, I will say something about a quite big scenario study that I was part of that was called Futures Beyond Gdp Growth. And the reason for the title was that we wanted to explore future developments where important sustainability targets were fulfilled, but GDP growth was not seen as an aim or as a target in itself. It could be useful for fulfilling other targets, but that was the reason behind the title. And in this project, we were some 15 researchers and also PhD students exploring what a sustainable future could look like. And we had our backgrounds in different disciplines, and we also cooperated with actors from the state and from NGOs and also municipalities within Sweden. And we saw it like this: when problems are complicated and kind of wicked as the quest for sustainable development, then it's important to challenge our common way of thinking and instead explore new ways that future development could mean. So future developments that might build on another logic than today's. And we therefore wanted to explore what a sustainable future in Sweden in the year 2050 could look like. And we did that through a scenario study and also a lot of different studies. So I won't go into details of everything. But just to say something about our starting point, we used backcasting as a tool for analysis and discussion. Maybe some of you are already familiar with backcasting, but you often start them with defining targets. So where do we want our development to head? And if we want the development to be sustainable, what are then important targets? And then you analyze those targets and today's trends and potentials to see whether we are reaching those targets or not. And if it seems like we are not on the right track, so to say, to reach those targets, then you need to think about what you can, what changes are needed. And you can do that by developing images of the future where you actually fulfill those targets, and then analyze those images and try to figure out ways to reach this future. And when it comes to the sustainability targets in this project, we decided to work with 2 targets more related to environmental sustainability, and that was climate change and land use, and then 2 targets more related to social sustainability. And when it comes to climate, we set up a target on the maximum emissions of carbon dioxide equivalents that we could emit per person in Sweden. And that figure is very low, but we wanted the scenarios to be quite kind of radical. If we really are to follow the Paris Agreement, what do we need to do then? And how much could we in Sweden emit if we were to emit the same amount of carbon dioxide all over the world? We also set up a target for Sweden being fossil free. And when it came to land use, the idea was that the per capita land area used for final consumption should not exceed the global biocapacity based on national footprint accounts. So that meant that we would look into the consumption from people living in Sweden of products produced both in Sweden and elsewhere, and see that land use caused by this consumption as something that we wanted to decrease to a fair level if you look globally. And then when it comes to social sustainability, we set up targets about the distribution of power, influence, and participation in society, meaning that all residents in Sweden, regardless of, for example, gender or gender expression, sexual orientation, ethnicity, and religious affiliation or age, disability, class, and income level, should be entitled to participate in and influence political choices and decision-making that affects their lives. So that was the idea, to see to that everyone could actually be part of influencing decision-making. And then when it comes to welfare or resource security, the idea was that residents in Sweden should have sufficient access to resources and services that can create opportunities for such things as housing and education, social care, and so forth. And the reason to why we did not define this as maybe having equal salaries or so, was that we wanted to open up for the possibility to discuss different futures, which you will soon see. And also that the distribution of the same resources should be made according to some fairness principle. And then very quick, then we decided, we designed 4 different scenarios called collaborative economy, local self-sufficiency, automation for quality of life, and circular economy. And you will see that they focus on different aspects. They all fulfill the same targets, but they build on different ideas of how to reach those sustainability targets. So collaborative economy focus on things like shared ownership, that people are prosumers, so they are not only consumers, but they're also part of producing things. It's also a strong focus on digitalization by seeing that you can share a lot of information through digital solutions. And in this scenario, people tend to live in smaller towns and cities. And there is a strong focus on what the civil society could do in order to enhance sustainable development. If we instead look on the scenario local self-sufficiency, there we have a high degree of self-sufficiency. Municipalities have a large influence over their own development. Many people in this scenario live in the countryside. And if we go to automation for quality of life, here it's a totally different future. So that is the idea, in order to be able to discuss very different future developments. There we have a lot of automation and robotization that helps us to reach the sustainability targets. And this means that people had the possibility to reduce their work hours. And in this scenario, this description of the future, people live in large cities because this is where you can have all this automation happening. And then in the last, circular economy in the welfare state, the idea is that waste no longer exists. There is a lot of focus on consuming services instead of goods. And there is a focus on the industry and how they can solve sustainability issues. And by this, I mainly wanted to show that in this research project, we wanted to describe that sustainable development can mean quite different things. And there are different ways in which we can reach important sustainability targets. But there are also choices that we need to make today that affect the future development. And we want to be able to make those in an aware way. And we also analyzed those different scenarios to see whether they actually fulfilled our targets. And this is just one example where we try to calculate how much carbon dioxide emissions those different scenarios would cause. And we can see that all scenarios reach or almost reach the target that we set up. And the main reason for that is that in all scenarios, consumption of goods needed to decrease a lot. So that would be a big change from how life in Sweden look today. We can also see that food or the consumption of food is quite different in the different scenarios. It's only in the local self-sufficiency scenario actually that it has takes a bigger amount of the carbon dioxide emissions, and that is because there people are kind of allowed to eat some meat, while in the other scenarios they are vegetarians or almost vegetarians, because there were not much space left for eating meat, since that causes carbon dioxide emissions. So by this, we wanted to raise discussions about what do we want to use kind of our carbon dioxide emissions for. Okay, so that was a huge research project, and these are just some few examples of the publications from that. If you are interested in reading more. There are papers presenting how we worked with the targets and how the scenarios look more in details and how we did the evaluation of the scenarios. Okay, but now to teaching or education at KTH. KTH offers almost 100 degree programs at first cycle and advanced level, and together they attract then around 13,000 students from all around the world. And KTH wants to encourage development of like innovative ideas and do that by having challenge-driven education. So often there are things that we want to work especially with in some of the teaching. So for example, sustainable urban planning. And then, as I said before, gender equality and diversity are important parts of the teaching. And from the autumn semester next year, all study programs then will include a mandatory part on gender equality and diversity. And then sustainability should be part of all programs. And KTH offers around 30 programs at first cycle and around 60 master program, all of them held in English. And I especially work within master programs within architecture and built environment and also energy and environment. And I will especially talk a little bit about a Master of Science program called Sustainable Urban Planning and Design. And I was part of developing that program and has been part of teaching in that program for several years. And the master program in Sustainable Urban Planning and Design focuses on the correlation between the built environment and social, economic, and institutional forces. And the idea is that students should gain a profound and broad understanding of the multiple factors in sustainable urban development. Again, like my research then, this teaching environment is very transdisciplinary. And the program brings together students of very different background. So they have their background in architecture, planning, civil engineering, and natural and social sciences. And this is, of course, a challenge when you meet the students, but it's also a very fun environment to teach in. And the idea is that students will be, by meeting each other and coming from different backgrounds, they will be equipped with theoretical knowledge and professional tools that position them to act as critical links, joining multiple perspectives together in sustainable planning and design processes, relevant in Sweden, of course, but also worldwide, and will often have students from all over the world. Within this program, the idea is that coursework should not only be like lectures or so, but instead a lot of time is also spent in studios and on projects that train students in practical skills, as well as giving them deep understanding of planning and design practice. So it's not only like a theoretical program, but there is a lot of practice. And the program offers 3 specializations, which you pursue by combining recommended courses. And the specializations are the ones that you see on the screen. So urban planning and design, urban and regional planning, or environment and planning. And during the program, students interact across those specializations in courses and in projects that then fosters a mutual exchange of knowledge and ideas between those different disciplines. And this means also that all students actually take part in the introductory course. So that is a course for all students in all those different specializations. And that course presents the overall subject and also deepens the understanding of how practices of planning and design can enhance sustainable urban development. And after this course, the students choose one of the specializations. Another feature of this program that we have kept from the beginning when we developed the program, and which the students really appreciate, is that throughout the program we invite lecturers from local and regional authorities, and also consultancies and architectural offices and other private actors. And the students really appreciate that, because then they get not only like the knowledge that we as teachers can provide them with, but they also get insights in contemporary practice of planning and design and sustainability issues, and see how people actually work with those things. So that is something that is really appreciated by the students. And also when they, in all courses, they work also in studios or on project assignments, and then they often work with ongoing city development projects in the Stockholm region, which allow them then to apply their knowledge in a practical setting. And that is again then appreciated by the students, but actually also by, for example, the municipalities and so on, that receive input from our students then on their ongoing projects. And I should also say that this is a 2-year program given in English then. And when they graduate, they receive the degree of Master of Science. And well, the difference between the specializations is that urban planning and design focus very much on critical and professional tools, and links very much to architecture. Urban and regional planning is more about strategic issues and long-term development. And then environment and planning is interdisciplinary and focus on how to practice governance, also how to use future studies and scenario making, and then to apply natural science. Just to give 2 examples of courses within this program. One course is called Resilience Thinking in Sustainable Planning. And this is a popular course where students first learn about theories and concepts underlying resilience thinking. So learning about things like planetary boundaries and how we can think about social ecological systems, so ecosystems, and how we humans are dependent on ecosystems. That is the theoretical part of the course. And then the students do an assignment, and then they actually work with doing a resilience assessment exercise. So they carry out a resilience assessment, and that could be that is often made on an ongoing plan then in the Stockholm region. So for example, a municipal plan that has been developed or are being developed, then the students look into that and make a resilience assessment with supervision from teachers. And the course that follows that course is the course that I'm responsible for, and that is called Planning for Environmental Justice in Social Ecological Systems. So then we continue to build on the things that they learned in the resilience thinking course, but now we add a justice perspective. And The intended learning outcomes from this course is that after passing the course, the students should be able to identify relevant issues and explain key concepts, theories, and perspective within the scope of the focus area of the course, planning for environmental justice in social ecological systems. They should be able to discuss and argue for and against different perspectives on environmental justice in social ecological systems. They should be able to give suggestions on how urban planning or civil engineering and environmental technology can be developed to identify, handle, and or prevent injustices with respect to use of ecological resources. And they should be able to apply the perspective of the course on real cases and communicate the result of the analysis to relevant target groups. So these are, well, what we want them to be able to do after taking the course. And the course is designed as this. So it contains of lectures, seminars, and project work. And we actually start with lectures, and that is when we present theories and of social ecological systems, and which they also learned in the previous course, but now with the focus on how they could be linked to issues of justice, so environmental justice, raising questions about who, meaning what groups in society, for example, are affecting the environment in a harmful way, and who are affected by environmental externalities. And in parallel to the lectures, we also have seminars. And for the seminars, the students, they have to prepare before the seminars, and then they read literature, and they prepare smaller assignment, and then they come to the seminars, and the idea then is to discuss the literature in order to receive a deeper understanding of the literature. And then the next part of the course is a project work, where students work in groups, and they look into a case, and the cases are different from year to year. But the latest years we have worked with cases from all over the world. Before that, we used to work with Swedish cases, but we found that since we have a lot of international students, sometimes it's more relevant to work with cases from other parts of the world. So they choose a case with the help of us, the teachers, because we have then some suggestions on what could be relevant cases to look into. And those cases can be about, for example, the development of infrastructure or land use issues, or mining related issues. But it can also be linked to, for example, consumption. And they use the literature and the learnings from the course in order to apply this knowledge then on their case. And then they write an essay about what they find during their research. And the course is then based on the knowledge about ecosystem services and how ecosystem services support all human life and our well-being, and is the basis for, well, having a good life. But that is then combined with not only looking into how the ecosystems work, but also how humans are very much interlinked with the ecosystems, and seeing that all humanly used resources are embedded in complex social ecological systems. And I think now maybe this is common sense, but some years ago, this was I would say not common sense in Sweden at least, but instead the picture was often that you can look into the human societies, that is one thing, and then you have the ecological systems, and they should work fine, but you seldom try to understand how these systems are actually interlinked. But the term social ecological systems then is used to emphasize this, that the social and ecological systems are interlinked and interdependent, because we can hardly find any ecosystems today that are not linked also to human systems. And as I said previously, we also add a justice perspective to this understanding, and this means that we want the students to understand that environmental harm does not always strike all groups in society the same way, and also not all countries in the world. So we focus a lot on that. We have some different examinations in the course. So the seminars that I told you about, they have to participate in the seminars, but they also have to prepare shorter assignments. Reading literature and prepare assignments. We have a home exam to examine the literature, and then we have the project work. And the seminars are just, you can receive pass or fail on these ones. On the other ones, you're graded from A to F. And in order to give individual grades on the project work, they also write an individual reflective text where they reflect upon their own learning in the project work and their own contribution, what were their main contributions and so on. So just to give you an example of what the seminar could be, this is just one example, but so for one seminar, the students were to read 2 papers about environmental justice and ecosystem services, and they received 2 study questions, like how do the 2 papers make use of the ecosystem services in the approach to address environmental justices, and what different aspects of justice are addressed in the 2 papers, because this is a very important part of the course to understand that there is not only one way to look upon justice, and as soon as we try to define what justice means, we will see that there are so many different interpretations. It's easy to say that we all want a just development, but when we try to define it, we will see that it's not as easy. And also to just give an example of what essays they might write. These are just 4 examples from last year's course. So carbon neutrality through the tree plantations, a real solution for all. So they looked into the idea that you can kind of buy yourself free from your carbon emissions by supporting tree plantations. 2 projects looked into planning in Sápmi, so the northern part of Sweden, where we have the Sami people living, where there are conflicts between the idea of having more mining and then the possibility for the Sami population to have their reindeer herding in the mountain area. And also a project looking into the Hambach forest in Germany, where, it's a very old forest where the idea was to have a brown coal extraction site. So students looked into that and how people were campaigning against that. Okay, so I think maybe talked too fast, but my main message is that within this master program and also another master program that I teach in, if I had told you about that as well, an important part is to put forward that there are different understandings of sustainable development, and how they are put into practice have different consequences for different groups of people, and also different consequences for the environment. And it's important to understand those different consequences. So that is one message that I wanted to give to you. So thank you for listening, and maybe you have questions.
Thank you, Ulrika. Very nice presentation. I had a question for you, but there are a lot of people answers to ask you. And I will be beginning with Andrea Catalina Martinez. She's one of the more involved people in this kind of topics. Then, Andrea, introduce yourself and ask the question.
Thank you, Alexander, and thank you, first of all, Professor Gunnarsson, for your presentation. I found it very, very interesting because we are doing or we are implementing some research projects very similar to where you're looking, and we are also interested in transitions. So we are working since I think 8 years ago with a community in this region in Colombia, looking for improving their well-being, their general life well-being, something close to what you are looking, which is going further or going or measuring development, not in GDP terms, but in a different measurements. So I have a question for you related to this line of research, and is regarding your backcasting tool. You showed some targets that you defined, but these were like country-wide targets. I mean, wider targets, and we are working with communities, small communities in the country. Have you done any research in local communities or in smaller places? And have you, or can you give us some recommendation about how to find the right targets to measure this, or to get these I mean, goals or targets designed?
Yeah, actually, and thanks for the question. I think it sounds like a really, really interesting project, and I've been part of projects where we try to kind of co-create targets with local communities, and I think that is so important because I mean, local knowledge is important to bring on board in those kind of projects. But one thing that was difficult then was that sometimes, at least in the project that I referred to, local residents maybe didn't have, I mean, they had some knowledge that was extremely relevant, but then they did not always have knowledge about maybe climate issues, for example. So we felt that it was not kind of enough to only listen to the local community. So I think one important thing is to how you can see it as an exchange of knowledge, so that you can both learn from each other, so that you can learn from the community and they can also learn from the research project. Sometimes I think as researchers we think that, okay, now we can go and kind of collect the knowledge, but it's also important to think of it as a knowledge exchange. I think that was one of my most important learnings.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, we have also the question of Gustavo. Please introduce yourself and ask the question.
Thank you very much. I am a Colombian. I am attending the meeting from Bogota. It's not so far away from Bucaramanga, and I am really happy to have here your your talk, Dr. Ulrika. I would like to ask you, on the context of urban planning, you were about to introduce the context of justice and environmental justice, which for us in Colombia is a hot topic, and I imagine is also of great interest for the Swedish government and the collaboration with Colombia due to the the very famous peace agreement. More about the question, it would be, this is a hot area in the world, Colombia. We have hard risks, hard, let's say, problems to solve relating both environmental care, but also human rights. It would be very interesting if this conversation we have today would be extended for a partnership of the university with the Bucaramanga University, especially because I have to say that the Swedish culture is a culture that involves in social, democratic, human rights, and in how can I say? Let's say like by all means, it is all connected, interlinked with environmental, especially in Bucaramanga, especially with um, the the high Sierra environments where gold mining is being a question for the last years in Santurban, for instance. So I would like to ask you if it's possible to continue research a connection between Sweden and Bucaramanga in this topic of human rights, environmental justice.
Thank you for your question. Yeah, I think that sounds really, really interesting and something I would really like to continue. And I think you are right that there are things that are in common that could be very interesting to continue to have a dialogue around. So I would really like that. And then just as a as a minor thing, Bogota, it's nice that you're from there. I had a pen friend there when I was a kid, so we were exchanging letters.
Okay.
But I look forward to continue this conversation somehow.
Okay, thank you, Gustavo. And right now we have Cesar Dario Guerrero, our head of research.
Thank you, Alexander, and thank you, Professor Gunnarsson. So I have two questions. So the first one I will relate with the previous question. And we had yesterday a wonderful conversation about how sustainable development is very related to the culture, and the meaning of sustainable development can be different, as you ended in the last slide. It can be different from different cultures, and by culture I don't mean country. I mean in Colombia we have different interpretations in different regions about sustainable development. And yesterday we were discussing about how culture, when the main topic of this event is culture and sustainable human development. So how culture can affect positively or negatively the sustainable development. And in that sense, so my question is related, if that it's something that you also discuss in your university, in your country, is you face the same issues, and that's an open question. We had a great conversation yesterday, and we came up with a conclusion that the definition of culture, not everything is culture, not the behavior of a community is called culture. So there are things that can be included in culture, and there are things that should not be included in the definition of culture. But so my first question is that rational, something that you also discuss in your university, in your country? You face the same situations?
So thank you for yet another interesting question. And I think you're totally right. And that is something that we discuss as well, how culture is linked to how you understand sustainable development. And one aspect of that is in Sweden, and I'm not sure how it is in Colombia, but there is actually divide between a gender divide. So there is a more like a masculine way to look at sustainable development that includes much more belief in technical solution, and then a more like female understanding of sustainable development that includes much more of care of humans, but also care of nature, and being like a responsible what do you say, responsible human, and to consume in a responsible way and to act in a responsible way. And these are also different understandings on sustainable development. And that is just an example linked to gender, but then of course you can link it to different ways of understanding culture and different ways of like acting out different cultures. And in Sweden we have, for example, then I mentioned it very briefly, but there are different ideas of future development between like the major population and the Sami, the indigenous population. So I think you're totally right.
Yeah, and before my second question, actually, that connects with what Gustavo was proposing. That will be interesting on having like a study on the differences between culturally different countries and in culturally different regions, and how they approach the sustainable development. And you add something related to gender, which is another point of view. And my other question is related to education. And when I was looking at your program, and when I did my first master in 1996, I think I started, and there was a core course in the master. It was that was from a master in Mexico, and the core course was leadership for sustainable development. It was a core course for every student. I'm talking about I don't know how many years ago. 1996, a lot of years, right? And so that was something that everyone wanted to be like. We need people to understand the complexity and the importance of this topic. And then so what I was thinking, how far are we, and how convenient will be to think about core courses, mandatory courses at the university level in every program, to have like this type of courses, and of course that's very difficult for different reasons, but if it is something that should be happening at the universities, and we've done something similar in other area that is creativity. So we have mandatory courses in creativity at the university, because that's something we want our graduate students to be recognized for. So sustainability could be another issue, of course. And so the one question is, how far, and if it is something that you promote inside your university to happen, how possible is that something like that can happen in the biggest university, as you said in one of the first slides in Sweden? And the other thing is related to, you mentioned in the courses that cases you were studying, cases. The study of cases was part of the strategies to have in the courses, and also the development of project work. And you mentioned that some of the cases were cases for international cases, because you have many international students. So I was wondering if you have in the programs this concept of service learning, where you where you actually, the case that you have is the case of a living lab in any part of the world, and where you have students that go actually and have an action in a community in any part of the world. And that's something that you also, because that's a very interesting approach that can also make connections and collaboration between our institutions. So again, two questions. So one is related to how do you think or can happen, or how important is to have like a core course, a mandatory course in every university. And the second one is the concept of doing projects but related or oriented to impact the community as a service learning approach.
Thank you very much. If I start with the first question, so the question about having a mandatory course, I think it's an interesting question. And if I think back at how it was at KTH when I was a student, then there was a mandatory course that all students had to take, and that was very much related to, it was more ecology, I would say, rather than sustainability, but it was it was very much about ecology, and that is also why many students didn't find it relevant for them. I mean, for some students it was relevant, but for some students, like studying computer science, for example, they couldn't really see why they needed this course. So then it was decided to instead integrate sustainability issues into like other courses. And now if I think about computer science, I know they have a very popular course where sustainability is like the main issue. And now they understand the relevance, and the students sometimes well, they almost start crying when they understand what they are part of, when they like develop some computer systems, and when they got to learn what consequences they might it might have in some countries, and for example with mining and, well, a lot of other things. So then the knowledge has become so relevant for them. So, well, by that I just want to say that having a mandatory course might sometimes mean that it's not always relevant for everyone, while having like different courses that are more targeted towards the different educational programs might mean that the courses are more relevant for the students. Even though, of course, that is also more difficult. Then you can't only develop one course, then you need to develop plenty of courses. But I mean, you could also think that if you have one mandatory course, then it has to be a course that somehow puts what the students learn in a wider context. So maybe being about broad sustainability issues. And then regarding the other question then about impacting the community or having living labs and so on, I would say that we do that to some extent, and especially together with municipalities, where the students can actually get to work with. I mean, we as teachers ask municipalities what they would like some kind of help with, and then the students work with those cases. And then we normally, for example, go to that municipality, and the student, they like this, they feel a bit important, and we have a meeting with the, maybe the, what is the English word for this? Well, the kind of the head of the municipality, I don't know the formal title in English, sorry. And other, maybe like the responsible person for planning or for the strategic development of the municipality and so on. And the students present their work for them. And that is very appreciated by the students, but also from the municipalities that receive some new kind of views or perspectives on how they can work with different tasks. But that is some kind of community service. But when it comes to living labs, we have that at KTH, but yeah, I would say that we do not use it as much as we could. We actually have one living lab together with the city of Stockholm that we can co-create, or the students can co-create solutions together with the city of Stockholm. And then we have a living lab, which is a bit different. That means that it's more for research, but the students are involved. So there are some student blocks where students live in apartments that are also used for for research. So right now there is a co-living project going on, trying to understand if we can use less indoor space for living, if we also use some spaces in common, like having a common kitchen or having some common spaces. And the students can live there quite cheap. So I mean, they like it because of that reason. But then they also take part in the research projects. But I really like your idea, and I think it's something that could be used much more than we actually do.
Thank you.
Okay. I have the right to my question, no? Okay. Ulrika, I would like to talk about transitions. Recently, you moved from a sustainability vision to a circularity vision. In practical terms, which has been the implications or consequences of this change in, for instance, the level of academic programs, at the level of resource in this area?
Sorry, I'm not sure that I really got the question. Can you repeat it, please?
Okay. Taking in account that Europe moved from a sustainability vision to one circularity vision, which have been the implications or consequences of this change of paradigm, for instance, in the planning of academic programs or prepare new professionals in this field, and also which are the change in resource in this area?
In circular economy.
In circular economy, yes.
Yeah, so I mean, circular economy is something that many researchers at my department actually work with in different ways. And I would say that, I mean, that is also the focus of how both Europe and Sweden wants to develop. If you look into like the political setting, or what is the political understanding of how we can reach sustainable development, then I would say that circular economy has a very strong role, both in an EU or European setting and also in Sweden. And there is a lot of research going on around then circular economy and bioeconomy, and now very popular the blue economy. So at my department, we have a lot of research focusing on, for example, how we can use algae for developing new material. Sorry, maybe not new materials, but using algae for developing other material to use for developing plastic and other things, and also for eating. So there, I would say it's a very wide spectrum of research going on, and also a very like politically relevant topic, and something that is that the research boards like to finance as well. So I would say it's a strong research field, but also very something that is kind of wanted by politicians. So there is quite much research funding, I would say.
Okay, thank you very much, Ulrika. Andrea, you have the word.
Thank you. Ulrika, have a nice day for you too. And we have another conference now. So I'm going to stop the
Recording.
recording. Yeah.
Thank you, Ulrika.